No burn-through, the shield held, and in that single moment everything changed. On the evening of May 22, 2026, a vehicle taller than most office towers rose off a freshly poured launch pad and climbed into the darkening sky over the Texas coast. The night before the attempt had been scrubbed, the countdown halted, the engineers sent home to wait. But tonight there was no hesitation. The engines lit, the ground shook, and for the first time the world got a real look at what the newest generation of Starship was truly made of. This was no ordinary flight. It was the first full test of a deeply redesigned vehicle, a machine rebuilt almost from the inside out. The booster was new, the ship was new, and the entire mission carried one quiet, enormous goal hanging over it like a question nobody could answer until the metal met the fire. Could this thing survive coming home? Because that is the part everyone forgets. Going to space is hard, yes, but coming back is the part that kills you. Roughly 47 minutes after liftoff, the ship hit the upper edge of the atmosphere over the Indian Ocean, traveling at hypersonic speed. And here's where the real story begins. Every spacecraft returning from orbit slams into a wall. Not a wall of stone or steel, but a wall of plasma. Superheated gas builds up in front of the vehicle, glowing brighter and hotter than the surface of the sun. It claws at every seam, every gap, every weakness, searching for a way inside. And for decades, the only way humans survived that wall was by building shields designed to die so the crew could live. But this ship was built on a different promise. When the plasma met its upgraded ceramic tiles, thousands of small hexagons coated in dark glass, it found them ready. The vehicle came through charred, but only lightly, only evenly, the way a well-cooked thing browns rather than burns, not pristine, not untouched, but whole, intact, alive in the way a machine can be alive, ready to fly again. And to understand why that matters so much, you have to understand just how cruel the engineers were to this particular ship on purpose. They could have played it safe. They could have flown a clean, careful mission to protect the hardware. Instead, they did the opposite. They deliberately ripped one heat shield tile off before flight, leaving a bare gap, just to see what would happen to the tiles around it when the fire poured through the hole. They painted several tiles bright white so cameras could track exactly how they behaved under stress. They pushed the rear flaps to the very edge of what the air could do to them at maximum pressure. And then they ordered the ship to bank, to roll through the sky in a sweeping maneuver that mimicked the path future ships will fly when they come screaming back toward their own launch towers. At one point, the ship folded its flaps inward and held them there locked, while traveling at 7 times the speed of sound. An older version of this vehicle would have been torn apart by that kind of stress. This one held. The flaps did not just survive, they worked, they obeyed. And when the moment came, they guided the ship through a tilting, flipping descent into a precise landing burn that used only 2 of its 3 engines, bringing the vehicle down to a controlled touch on the surface of the ocean. Then, exactly as planned, it tipped over and exploded. That part was supposed to happen. The ship had done its job. The cheers that erupted from the control room were not the cheers of people who had gotten lucky. They were the cheers of people who had set out to prove something and had proven it. But maybe the most forward-thinking part of the whole mission happened quietly, up in orbit, before the fire ever started. 2 specially modified satellites had been released earlier, fitted with imaging sensors and given an almost strange little task. Their job was to fly close and scan the ship's heat shield, photographing the tiles, checking them for damage, and beaming those pictures back down to the engineers on the ground. Think about why that matters. If you truly want a spacecraft that can land, get inspected, and launch again the very same day, the way an airliner turns around between flights, then you need a way to check 18,000 tiles without sending a single human up a ladder with a flashlight. You need to inspect a ship in space before you ever trust it to come home again. And on this flight, for the first time, they showed that such a thing might actually be possible. So how does a heat shield like this actually work? The answer is about 18,000 small ceramic tiles, each one shaped like a hexagon made from a silica base and coated in dark glass. Every single tile rolls off an automated production line where it takes around 40 hours to go from raw material to a finished piece ready to fly. Behind each tile sits a backup layer designed to char and protect the hull, so that even if one tile goes missing, the vehicle underneath is not instantly doomed. And between the tiles sits a soft, heat-resistant filler material, flexible enough to take the punishment, sealing the tiny gaps where plasma loves to sneak through. This is the part that separates this approach from everything that came before. On earlier flights, this same kind of ship shed tiles like a snake shedding skin. Plasma found the seams, heat leaked through, but each failure was studied, dissected, and answered with a change in the hardware on the very next flight. New tile shapes, better fillers, tighter manufacturing, improved backup layers, and because the company could build and fly several ships in a single year, the lessons stacked up fast. The failures were not embarrassments to be hidden, they were lessons in a curriculum. The flights were the classroom, and the whole system was designed from the ground up to be reused, inspected quickly, repaired one tile at a time, and flown again. This is not the old way of building spacecraft where every vehicle is treated as a precious, irreplaceable work of art. This is spacecraft built like a product, at scale, for a future where flying to space looks more like catching a flight than launching a moonshot. And to truly appreciate how radical that is, you only have to look at the other great heat shield of this era, the one carried by the spacecraft built to take humans back to the moon. That capsule carries the largest heat shield of its kind ever built for a crewed vehicle. It is made of nearly 200 machined blocks of an ablative material bonded onto a titanium skeleton, descended from the very same family of materials that protected the Apollo capsules coming home from the moon more than half a century ago. There is nothing shameful in that heritage. It is proud, proven, and reliable, but it is built on a fundamentally different idea. It is designed to be consumed. It chars, it cracks, it carries heat away by destroying itself, layer by layer, and when the mission ends, the shield ends too. There is no next flight for it, no quick turnaround, just survival once and then it is thrown away. That difference became impossible to ignore after the uncrewed test flight returned from the moon at the end of 2022. When engineers inspected the shield afterward, they found it had worn away in more than 100 separate spots, in ways that none of their models had predicted. After months of analysis and well over 100 ground tests, they traced the cause to something happening deep inside the material itself. During the part of re-entry where the capsule dips into the atmosphere, skips back out, and then comes down for its final descent, gases generated inside the shield could not escape fast enough. Pressure built. The material cracked. Charred chunks broke loose and flew away. And here is the cruel little twist at the center of it. They had tested the shield on the ground at temperatures hotter than what it actually faced in flight. The shield, in a sense, performed better than expected. It stayed cooler than the worst case, but that very success is what broke it. The cooler real-world temperatures slowed down the charring while trapping the gases inside more effectively than anyone had modeled. The shield was punished for doing well. By the time the engineers fully understood the problem, the capsule meant for the next crewed mission was already fully assembled, wearing the same basic shield design. Rather than tear it apart and start over, they made a different choice. They changed the path the capsule would fly, a steeper angle, no skip, a more direct dive home, and they sent 4 human beings up on that adjusted trajectory. Not everyone was comfortable with that. A retired astronaut argued openly and publicly that the engineers did not yet fully understand the root cause, and so they could not truly predict how a changed flight path would behave under real conditions. He was not wrong to worry. In effect, a materials problem was being solved with a flying technique, a bet that going around the flaw was safer than understanding it. In April of 2026, that bet paid off. 4 astronauts came home safely with only minor wear noted at the edge of the capsule. But the flaw in the material itself was never fixed. It was only avoided. And future missions are set to fly with a redesigned version of the shield that will not have been tested on a real return from the moon before it is asked to do exactly that. This is the heart of the contrast. Both programs have faced problems. The difference is how they treat them. On the newer ship, tiles have been lost, flap hinges have been scorched, experimental metal tiles were tried, rusted badly under heat, and thrown out entirely. The man behind the program has called the heat shield the single hardest unsolved problem facing the vehicle. None of that has been hidden. Every failure has been absorbed and answered with a hardware change on the very next flight, at a pace only possible because so many vehicles can fly in a single year. None of this means the problem is solved. The new ship still has to prove it can reach full orbit, refuel in space, dock, and descend all the way to the surface of the moon. Its shield has never yet faced the brutal speeds of a true lunar return, which are far more violent than anything it has flown through so far. And the older capsule, for all its compromises, has already done something undeniably real. It carried 4 living human beings out to the distance of the moon and brought them home alive. That is not a small thing, that will never be a small thing. But the direction of these 2 stories points clearly one way. One is being built slowly, expensively, each vehicle treated as a single irreplaceable artifact. The other is being built the way a modern factory builds machines, iteratively, at scale, each flight treated as one more data point on a steep and rising learning curve. The wall of plasma does not care which philosophy a program chooses. It applies the exact same test to every vehicle every single time without mercy and without exception. What matters in the end is not the ambition behind the shield, it is the engineering underneath it. And right now, for the first time in the history of human spaceflight, that engineering is changing faster than the ambition can keep up.